I get a lens that is really unique. And the lens today is focused on some amazing women. I'm going to step back and say, you thought you're going to get some introduction, right? All you ladies thought you're going to get a real fancy introduction. No, nothing. Because we are short on time, we had to condense this. So out with the bios, because if you haven't read them, I suggest going back. Because these are individuals who I'm going to call, they're very talented, they're very smart, they're experienced, they're sage, they have a lot of curiosity, and they're also really personable. And that can't be said always when you look at women who have achieved this kind of a role at a university like Duke. So I'm also going to add that they are without doubt forever learners. And hopefully, as you hear always about this concept of forever learning, that's not for just a few of us. It's for all of us. And the female, maybe the men too, but female Board of Trustee members are always representatives of that. So I'd like you to welcome today, I'm just going down the way here, Ann Pelham, Amy Kramer, Janet Hill, Martha Monserrate, and Katy Hollister. I'd also like to say something about the women trustees. Between 10:30 and 1:30 this morning, I needed 3 new trustees because 3, for the obvious reasons of challenges, both getting out and coming in, could not be with us. Not only did I get 3 between 10:30 and 1:30, Martha, I think you win the prize on the 1:30. I got 4 more this morning by 7:30. So those 4 are the either lucky or unfortunate ones because we filled the panel at full strength. So that says to me a lot about the kind of commitment and willingness to jump in and not just, well, I'm already doing a panel, I can't possibly do another. No, that's not what happens here. So with a change out that we've got going on, I'm really grateful to you all for showing up. I also want to do a quick shout out to the DAA team because they moved mountains to get us all set up. So if we could kind of do a little of that. We're going to focus today on a few areas. We're going to touch on them. And having come off of the previous session, who was at the previous session here in this room? Okay. I want you to just kind of go home because we're going to be segueing now in a different way. And yet that session, I thought, set the stage for real people doing great work and having challenges too. It's just not maybe sometimes as obvious because of the roles that these wonderful women play. So I just segueing from that session to this one is fascinating. This is not a fear, failure, and other 4-letter words, but I can promise you that everyone has a story that may find its way into their comments. We are going to talk about paths to the trustee role because that's something that's kind of interesting, I think, out there. How, why, who, how did you get here? So we're going to talk about that. We might talk about some less than successful attempts to try things along the way and what possibly required a regrouping. We're going to talk about perspectives as a board member. And I hope we'll be as candid as we feel comfortable being in terms of the Board of Trustees environment. And then we're going to talk about the vision for the university, some of the just key strengths, differentiators, what makes Duke special, and what are some of the challenges ahead as well. So let's talk path briefly. I'd like to turn to the group with the question around what Duke-related activity, what Duke thing that you did was something that stays in the back of your mind as you serve on the Board of Trustees. Many years ago, I was on the Trinity Board, and that gave me a perspective of Duke, the big Duke, not my New York City Duke at the time, where it was Duke bigger picture, but it was undergraduate focused. But it still gave me a lens that has stayed with me on the Board of Trustees. passing the baton, this is going to be one of the questions where you do get to all answer very quickly, and then we will not have everyone answering all the questions. So, jump in. Janet.
Wow.
You are not, having, by the way, a Duke parent. So we have a prestigious parent of a prestigious son. But that's not the story.
Okay, but I'll start with him because that is my link to all of you. My son is Grant Hill. He graduated in 1994. Some of his classmates are here in the room.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I am a Duke parent. I'm also the oldest member of this board. And I've been on the board longer than anyone else because alumni who serve on the board serve for 12 years, but parents serve for 15.
This one, anyway.
In special circumstances.
Special circumstances. My path here, two things. One, I and my husband, we were chairs of the Duke Parents Program while Grant was here, and challenged by Sterling, who at the time was in charge of that. We raised more money than any other parents, but especially the Princeton parents, who were #1 in the country. And my husband, who went to Yale, announced that he never lost to Princeton, and he wasn't going to start at Duke. So that was first, and second was 14 years on the Fuqua board. Mm-hmm. So I have been on this board now 14 years also.
I love it.
Thank you.
So a double board experience. Anne.
Well, I was privileged to have Laura's job as the president of the Duke Alumni Association.
I was hoping you'd reference.
And there's no question that I was. It was the greatest opportunity I'd had at Duke, and it was a wonderful way of learning about all the different things that are going on at the university. And Sterling kept putting me back in line when I would get out of line, and I learned a lot from that as well. And it was fun to see the growth, which has just continued in all of the outreach and activities that we've all experienced all over the country. We don't have to just come to Duke to do Duke things anymore. This is a great example of a signature event where we come back and it's really so much fun. But if I live in DC, and if I really wanted to, I could find a Duke event, almost every week. That's an exaggeration, but you could go to bars every other week and find people to hang out with. But the quality of the programming.
We're not going to continue that line.
The quality of the programming and the opportunities to stay connected to Duke, and I have to say that I love the reunions, but one of the nice things about the people that I've met in DC, and some of them are here, is that they're all ages. So you get a chance to connect with people that you have one connection with through Duke, but no one minds if you're old. They'll talk to you anyway, and it's been great.
Super. Amy?
So my process was a little different. Duke is unique in the fact that they have young voices on the Board of Trustees. So one undergraduate and one graduate student is selected each year. The processes are different, so I'll speak for the undergraduate process, although the other Amy in 2018, we were picked together. It was the year of the Amy. She's in the audience. But there was, the process basically was you wrote an application, and then a student body reviewed the applications, chose a group of people to interview, and then of the people who are interviewed, 4 are selected to run a university-wide campaign. And I was not a very popular student. I didn't think that I didn't have the networks, the social organizations, the Greek organizations, the natural vehicle through which to run a university-wide campaign, so I almost did not apply. And it was a good thing that there was a big social push to get more women to apply that year. It was only 2 of the last 10 young trustees at that point by 2018 had been female. And so a lot of my really good friends, for whom I'm very grateful, pushed me to apply. Because I thought I would be really good in the role. I just didn't think that I wanted to put myself out there. And I'm really glad I did, because the process of running a campaign across East and West Campus for 18 days with, I think I had 76 meetings over the 18 days with every single student organization on campus, with hundreds, if not thousands, of students. To begin my last semester of Duke with that experience gave me the greatest and most profound appreciation for this university, and something that I don't forget and carry with me through every meeting. And I only have 2 meetings left, as the young folks only get a 2- or 3-year term, but it has been the greatest privilege of my life.
Awesome, Amy. Martha?
So I I spent 8 years on the Board of Visitors for the Engineering School before joining the Board of Trustees. I started on the Engineering Board of Visitors when the idea of the CMOS building, I don't know if any of you are familiar, how many know what that is? The Center for Integrated Engineering, Math, and Applied Science. That was just a thought that the then Dean, Christina Johnson, had. And she talked to me about her ideas and said, you know, I really want to make this happen. And she's very dynamic dean and very persuasive. Before I knew it, I was on the board of visitors. And before I knew it after that, I was hosting an event at my home. She did an interesting approach at the time, which was to do one event in each of 10 cities with the goal being to raise $1 million in each event. You know, which is a pretty high bar, I thought, considering I was then tapped to host one of these events. But as it turned out, had the event in my home, and we ended up with participants from class years ranging from 1945 to 2000 at that time. And it was just a really amazing, it was apparently the first time that many engineers had all gathered together from the different class years in the New York area like that. And of course, she spoke very eloquently, and it was just great energy. And we met our $1 million goal that night. So from there, the building was built, and great things have happened there ever since. It was very exciting to me to see what that building enabled in terms of interdisciplinary study and innovation. And I wanted to do more of that, in particular in the facilities area, because I am a civil engineer. And then I was tapped to be on the Board of Trustees, and immediately was very honored and accepted that. So enjoyed it ever since. This is, I think, I'm the second longest tenure. I'm in year 11 of 12.
And Katy.
Well, you know, honestly, the process of getting on the board is a little elusive. Unless you're on the governance committee where the nominees are vetted, you really don't know how you got on the board. If you want to be really honest, you said we're being frank here, right? So the process is pretty elusive. So I can only tell you my Duke journey and what I did that drew me to Duke, and the rest of it, I don't know how I got on the board, honestly. But in probably, my husband and I are both Duke grads. We graduated in '81. We came back here for social and sports stuff for a while, but I personally really plugged into Duke in 2010. I work at Deloitte. I'm a tax partner there. And Deloitte was trying to figure out how to get this really big growing population of people into smaller cohorts. And one of the things they decided they wanted to do is put people in cohorts that were that went back to each school. So when I heard that, I raised my hand, and they were only going to do it for 30 schools. So I raised my hand and said, if Duke's on that list, I want to lead that community. Well, Duke was on the list because we have a great employment reputation here. We hired hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people from Duke at Deloitte. We have about 500 to 600 alum that are there at any present time. So they said, okay, fine, do that job. And I said, well, how do you do this job? And they said, we don't know because we just started this, so figure it out. So I called my friend Sterling, or I think I wrote her a note and said, remember me? And I said, help me with this, introduce me to some people on campus so I can get this going. Anyway, long story short, we did a really interesting thing, sort of rallying that 500 to 600 people at Deloitte who really weren't all that engaged in Duke, I didn't think. And my mission was to figure out how to engage 500 to 600 people back in their university. And we did some interesting fundraising things and stuff like that. So that was pretty cool. Then in 2013, my younger son came to school here, and my older son came to work here. So I have a very famous son too, but not a basketball player. He raised money in Duke Athletics, and he works at the V Foundation right now. But so my husband and I had this chance in 2013 to have a couple of years where both our kids were at the same place, one employed and one in school. And so we decided that if we were ever going to double down in our engagement, it was going to be 2013, because we didn't know if it was 13, 14, 15, 13, 14, 15, 16. We just didn't know how long it was going to last. So we toured all around the campus, and we figured out where we wanted to double down our engagement, both from a time and a financial standpoint. In 14, I went on the Fuqua board because we have a very big relationship with Fuqua at Deloitte. That's been fabulous. Like being on the DAA and the engineering board and so forth, it opens your eyes to, in my case, the graduate education here, which I hadn't known very much about. So that was cool. And then one day, out of the blue, after our parent party for my kid coming here, Dick Broadhead called me and said, "Hey, I happen to be in town, and would you like to go out for dinner with me?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And so I said, "I'll make a reservation in this place and just meet me here." And he said, "Well, I have somebody with me. I have a guest who's traveling with me, and his name's Jack Bovender." So I said, "Okay, fine, bring Jack, no problem." And so I said to my husband, "Brad, do you want to come along? I'm Jack and Dick and I are going to go have dinner together." And he goes, "Yeah, I'll come along." He goes, "What do you think it's about?" I said, "I have no clue. They probably want to ask us for money." So we go to the dinner, and at the end of the dinner, Dick Broadhead said, "Well, we'd like you to be on the board." And I about fell out of my chair, frankly, because I was totally shocked because the process is pretty elusive. And that's how it happened.
May I add
get to that.
I had the Dick Broadhead experience where he called and said he would like to have coffee with me because he was
You
in the
didn't get a
Washington,
dinner. Oh.
D.C. area. We met at a bar where we ordered 2 cups of coffee at 4 o'clock. I was convinced that he wanted to know the secret to dealing with Coach K. I was ready for this conversation. But instead, he said they would like you to join the board. I was shocked.
Yeah.
Same shock.
So
Did you ever
can-
get to tell him about Coach?
No, I didn't get a chance. But I'm going to try to do that
later.
with President.
My poor husband, he just looked like, "Well, what about me?"
Pretty good.
I was like, "You got to come to the dinner."
So isn't this interesting? You're hearing experiences, some similar paths, yes, but the voices you're hearing about how it happened, and then did you hear the enthusiasm that every single person, they started getting so excited and therefore talked longer than they should.
Oh, sorry.
No, just kidding. Because of the enthusiasm and excitement that they had for how they were becoming engaged. And that comes to the curious side, not just the doing side, but the engagement. And so many people in this room are already in spaces like this, doing a variety of kinds of engagement with Duke. Like to step back now, move away from the direct board path related to Duke, but any one of you want to touch on a work or personal experience, professional or personal experience, that helped prepare you to feel confident, comfortable, and ready to play on the Board of Trustees? Katy.
Well, I had the wonderful opportunity of being on the board of Deloitte for 6 years, both our U.S. firm board and our global board. And that was an amazing experience. And I learned quite a lot about the difference between managing a firm. It's a private organization, so it's not like a public board or anything like that. But I learned quite a bit about the difference between managing an organization, which the administration does here, and overseeing the organization. And it was hard because at Deloitte, everybody who's on the board is actually also a Deloitte partner, so it's sometimes hard to draw the line between management and oversight. But nonetheless, we did draw that line all the time, and so that gave me a unique perspective, I think, to being on a board, and I loved the experience. It was fabulous. It was like surfing, like when people say bird's eye view, because that bird is up there and gets to see everything. That's exactly what it was like being on the board, and I feel like that's what it's like being on the board here.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
I feel it prepared me well.
Good point. Any other?
I was on the board of my children's K through 12 private school and ran the facilities committee for construction of new athletic fields and a new auditorium and upgrades to upper school science laboratories. And so that really, I think, was great preparation for the massive amount of, on a much smaller scale, but so Duke has been through that same kind of transformation here over the last 10 years, and I think it helped me a lot.
And Martha was on the committee that helped lead some of that physical
facilities
plant change. So.
Right.
Anybody else want to jump in with either a risk you might have taken that you learned something from the other side, a situation of organizational change? I know Amy touched on her running for office and how, you know, that certainly would have had some moments associated with it.
I had a wonderful career as a reporter and an editor, and the opportunity came at the newspaper I was working for to basically switch teams, sort of switch sides. It seems it shouldn't be that way, and I think with the internet, some of the lack of communication in a news organization between the editorial side and the business side has broken down in good ways, let's hope, not bad ways. But I became the associate publisher, and I was, the main thing that excited me was that I was going to get a big raise. But they said, well, why don't you do the budget? So for the first time in my life, I opened up Excel. And I was a little dazzled by all the numbers. And then I saw that, gosh, maybe, what is this with the number and the letter? And I found out that each of those cells had an identification. And there was a possibility. And then I noticed that there were some formulas. I had to figure out what those were. And I stayed up all night. But it really wasn't that hard because you sort of just had to make some incremental change in all the numbers from the year before. And I thought, okay, I can do this job. And I was a little naive because, you know, it always gets more complicated later. But it certainly made me more comfortable with numbers than I had been in the past. And I realized that, you know, you can still switch gears later in life and take on something new. And I did enjoy the extra money.
You're here. So I'd like to turn to perspectives as a board member because I do think we have seasoned members here and then we have newer members represented. And taking a lens to the overall board, how has the board helped you problem solve and think about issues in a fresh and different way? What is your lens on the board that has been shaped by virtue of sitting around the table with this terrific group of people?
Well, I can certainly brag to Grant Hill that, number one, I know more about Duke than he does. So that is a big point for me. And then I want to thank Sterling for giving me a Forever Duke Award, which I thought was going to be like a medal I could wear around my neck, but it's so large I look like Flavor Flav or something. So I don't wear it, but I do have it, and I flash it in front of him. In terms of the board itself, this is a superior board. That's all I can say. You have superior board members here and others who are in the audience, but and including the men also. The leadership of the board has been excellent in the many years that I have been on the board. I have served on 12 corporate boards in the last 35 years. I've served on 25 nonprofit boards. I have seen mediocrity. I will not name names. There is no mediocrity here. There's none on this stage. There's none in the boardroom that I can find. I especially compliment two things. One, we're very inclusive about involving everybody in decision making. And secondly, we depend upon the young trustees to speak up. Normally, that's not a problem. They speak up more than we do. But that's a good thing because their perspective is necessarily different than our own. But it's one that's very, very valuable. So thank you.
Thank you. And I guess I'll say how everyone listens to me, which I don't think I expected before I started. But with respect to your question on perspective, I know, so I had just finished 4 years as an undergrad. Last year I was commuting from China where I was earning my master's degree. And so I got sufficient miles, and I'm glad that the Schwartzman program allowed me to still have my board responsibilities. But as as an undergrad, I thought I was the most important person on this campus. I think a lot of undergraduates think that they're the most important person on this campus, and I happen to be serving on the resources committee, so I see how big Duke actually is and the numbers behind it. And I was floored the first time I started doing all of the homework before the first meeting and reading the hundreds and hundreds of pages to be prepared, and I realized how big this institution is, how global this institution is, and how complex decisions are that from the outside may seem quite simplistic. And I know that beginning my professional career now as a graduate, I look at leadership differently. I look at organizations differently, both big and small. And I also realize that sometimes until you're in the room that it happens, that there's a lot that is difficult to appreciate.
You know, it's worth mentioning here, and if I'm not allowed to say this, you'll stop me. The Jack Bovender and Lorraine Sperling, who are going to be with us, Lorraine was going to be with us, attended a gathering of similar sort of board chair, executive committee member of respective high-level university boards, and I believe it's in Boston, you know, convergence of top universities. And Jack mentioned that we have this, you know, young trustee program, and people, first of all, their jaws dropped. And then they said, well, they don't really go to the meetings, right? Yes, they go to the meetings. Well, but they don't, I mean, they don't talk. They don't serve on committees. They serve on committees. I think
And they talk.
they may have turned, excuse me, that was my last point, exactly.
Yeah.
They vote.
Yeah.
And this was absolutely a stunner to their cohorts, with their colleagues with different universities. So I think, again, it speaks to Duke being fresh, innovative, being a younger, quote, university sometimes works in our favor.
Just a quick anecdote. So I had been living in China right before my first board meeting, so October. We get about a week in advance the agenda of what's going to happen, and I see my name speaking to the entire board over a lunch on Duke Kunshan University because I had spent orientation there. As I asked, I said, I'm in China, can I help with this very important strategic initiative that we have? Can I get to know the students? Good thing a lot of the students thought I was one of them, so they told me a lot of things. And I saw my name speaking to the entire board on my first meeting before any of them actually knew if I could speak or not.
And she rocked as your
So that's just a quick anecdote to say that that we're encouraged, and it has been a real privilege to be able to participate in that meaningful way.
So Laura, I think we might want to talk a little bit about the governance changes because, you know, it was 2008 and 10 when I was on the board before, and I think that one of the things Duke likes to do is keep improving, and I was encouraged that the board is not just sitting on its hands, but it's trying new things and working harder to make sure that the committees are effective and that everyone has a chance to speak. But maybe you could.
I'd love to touch on that. I actually did, because Katy, I think, had been good about popping that in as an item. Lorraine Sperling started this a year ago as the chair of governance. There was no governance committee. It was part of the executive committee, which would be logical. No governance, no home specifically for identifying new board members, the process of voting on them, the bylaws, that the host of items that gets put into one place. It has segued to Patty Morton, actually, who is going to be with us today as the chair. And Janet and I serve on that committee. And I can honestly say, when I heard the reference to the transparency, I am also so proud to see, and Janet, I see you nodding, the levels to which much more work is being done to really dig into a process that gets, obviously it's a confidential process. I mean, let's be clear, you know, but it is one where we not only look at skills and experience and talents and money and all of the things that go into the normal boxes. We are focused on the attributes of Duke Board of Trustee members. And that focus this year is taking us to really look at beyond the traditional grid that your spreadsheet earlier might have normally produced, and bring in some of those qualitative pieces that ultimately create a board. To Janet's point, we have this amazing group of people on the board, and it comes from the instinctual aspects in some ways of bringing people together for those attributes. Obviously, again, the other pieces are, well checked. This is going to become more inculcated into the process, and I think that has, it is also personally, being able to be part of that process, been probably one of the most exciting lenses I've had in a role ever. So,
Can I just add something to that? So something that I think is really interesting about the board is that each person on it brings something really unique. It's partly their personality, partly who they are, how they ask questions, the topics they're interested in. But when you look at the whole thing, it functions as a unit, but it's because the parts are all so uniquely distinct. So I'll start down there. So Anne is relatively quiet at the meetings, but when she speaks up and says something, it's really insightful, and you can tell that she's been thinking about it for a long time and mulling it over in her head. And also, Anne was so nice to me when I joined the board. She reached out to me beforehand because we have a mutual friend, and we met and had a drink together. So that was really nice. Amy, well, it's no wonder she has this Schwartzman award. I will just say, because it's amazing. I mean, she's very, very smart. Janet is direct, hilarious, also doesn't speak a lot, but when she raises her hand, everybody's like, oh, here it comes. And Martha is our environmentalist. She always is looking out for like the thing around facilities or environment or green, and it comes from your engineering background. But so everybody has like their own sort of little personality, and it's the composite of the board that makes it such a good board. When I first came on, I thought it was going to be a bunch of guys who ran private equity firms. That's basically what I thought it was, and I was shocked. Like the personalities of everybody, and our DAA president, you know exactly what her role is on the board. She's always thinking about alumni and how to make this sort of a community of of a place, not just a place for students to come. The whole picture of wrapping in alumni, and that I think is amazing about the board, that it is a unit. And we make some really tough decisions, and they're not clear, like Amy and Janet said, but everybody brings their own little sort of special thing to the table. And that's why the governance committee, I think, is really important, going back to what you said, because you said you're looking at attributes and qualitative things about people that make up the whole. So it's very cool.
And Katy chaired one of the 4 task forces last year. That was an experiment that came out of the governance conversations on
activating
the global network, which is a euphemism for saying getting all the alums more engaged.
And I want to get to that, but I do want to ask the question of when there is a topic that truly is, I'm not going to use the word divisive. I have not observed divisive, but I have observed some different, fairly strongly different perspectives. Maybe that's a way to put it. How would you characterize the board's problem-solving approach?
Well, I'll give an example, if you will. And it was the decision to build the campus in Qinshan, China. You just mentioned it, and thank you very much for that presentation and future presentations. And all of us were supposed to go to China in March of this year, but because of the virus, we have postponed that until the fall. That was not an easy decision. I would say I don't know if everybody here was on the board, but there were at least 3 meetings, one of which was in the Krzyzewski Center in the Scharf room with one of our trustees who is a Chinese national on a speaker. The speaker was here, so it felt like he was up here.
Voice of
but
God.
in fact, he was in China, and we're arguing. And listen, this is a very serious undertaking, not only halfway around the world. And by the way, my first feeling was, my goodness, we're just learning how to run the school in Durham. We're going to build a brand new campus halfway around the world? No, my vote is no. But in fact, it changed over time, if you will. So I just say that it wasn't easy. It was not cantankerous, and there was no fighting in that sense. But I think every conversation, every comment was valid in getting to a point that we decided to do it.
And just to add to that, one of my real problems with that plan was that the initial structures were going to be built by the city of Kunshan and to their specifications. And if you know the way the Chinese do building, they basically have the shell on a plan and they hand it to a building contractor and say, build this. The typical American set of drawings will have an electrical drawing, a mechanical drawing, the structural drawing, the foundation drawing. It's a big set of plans like this. In China, it's just here, build me a building. So what was lacking in that, and what really concerned me as a parent and as a trustee, was that there was very little specification in terms of life safety systems. What are you doing for fire alarms? How about sprinklers? Are all your electrical systems grounded? Couldn't answer any of those questions, of course. So I insisted that we send one of our Duke construction managers over there for a year and a half at a cost of $1 million to make sure that every one of those buildings was going to be safe for our students and our faculty. And that was not a popular idea. It took a while for the board to come around and vote in favor of that, but you know, now I can sleep at night, right? And I think we all can sleep at night knowing that those buildings are built to U.S. standards, not Chinese standards. So, yeah.
So I would like to segue now to this sort of bigger vision aspect of the board. And I had the opportunity to be in the room when Vince presented his strategic plan. And 5 planks. You have the alumni network as the 5th plank. What university has that in their top 5 strategic goals? All 5 under Duke Will. How many of you have looked at the Duke Will website? Okay, see our DAA boards. Yes, go.
And if you haven't, just
Yes.
Google Duke Will and it'll come right
So
up.
it's beautiful. And it's sort of the president's way of describing these 5 planks. And I mention this because I was relatively new on the board, and you had all these people who I knew were so smart, and they were going to just, they're going to take this thing and ready to provide comments. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone to a person was so pleased at the thoughtfulness, the depth that had gone into the thinking. And finally, one fellow raised his hand and said, I hesitate to add anything but, and he provided a little insights, and then several more came. But my point is that we have a president whose view is in lockstep with the board that works so closely together with his lead administrators. That dynamic I was floored, frankly, because I was used to a corporate environment, where you have much more of a, let's throw some darts here, and no, that did not happen. So our strategic plan of 5 planks, Duke Will, is at the heart of where Duke is going for its next 100 years. And I'd love to now turn it to this group and say, what are your thoughts as you are familiar with Duke Will, but what aspect of this most excites you? What's our greatest challenge? Talk a little bit about that.
I'll start. So what's impressed me the most about this, first of all, I think President Price's, whoever was on the search committee and found him.
I was.
I thought, that's what I thought.
Thank you. On behalf of the
He was a terrific find, and he's been an outstanding leader of this university. what I like best about what he's done is the university is fairly decentralized, like most academic institutions are. And there's actually something really great about decentralization because it means all the parts have a stake in the game and a fair amount of autonomy, and therefore they're engaged and they make decisions, but usually it's about their part. And that's the bad part about decentralization, is that the parts don't very often come together. So my observation is that he came in and extremely quickly, in a matter of months, basically went on a listening tour, quickly processed the place, figured out what the place needed to do in order to grow in its brand and its excellence, and put together this plan that Laura is referring to, that I thought was extremely strategic and business-minded for an academic. And that's not a dig against academics at all. It's just a different way of thinking. So I was really impressed with that. Then I was really impressed with the past basically 20 months or so, because each part of the university actually knows that plan. They are pulling their plans to that plan. And so what he's done in about 24 months is he came up with a plan to centralize a decentralized place without centralizing it. He didn't change the structure. He's just got everybody thinking in a common way. And so you know how teams and parents and families and organizations that have a common shared values they work well. That's how this place is now working, I think, and I think it's been amazing. Yeah. He's a very good leader.
Other comments on either the plan or strategically where Duke is going in the next 100 years as a function of that?
Very quickly, I used to give tours to prospective folks here, and in the script that you memorize with all the fun facts about the university, they tell you how you can technically trace Duke's history back to a little brown schoolhouse in 18 whatever, and I used to tell my tours, okay, here are the numbers, but Duke as we know it is less than 100 years old, which instead of focusing on how we are more similar to all of the older universities and our history can be traced back, rather I think what's more remarkable is how young we are and yet everything that we've accomplished. And so if that's a symbol for what's to come, I think remarkable change is exciting and something that we're uniquely poised to do and committed to do. And so, with a broad stroke, I think that's what's coming. And I agree. I think President Price's leadership in this plan is a great first step, but I'm excited for the next 100 years and all the great things to come.
Well, you may be the only one around for the next That's great, Amy.
And all that's not to say that there aren't a lot of challenges. I mean, there are a ton of challenges that this university and frankly every other university in the world needs to work through in terms of the cost benefit perception of higher education, the pure cost and accessibility or lack thereof to it, the mix of academics and business, that used to all be separate, and now we have this research translation and commercialization of research that's kind of challenging that notion. I mean, there are a ton of issues to work through, so it's not all bright and cheery.
No,
but
it's tough.
But there's a good underpinning for tackling those challenges.
Well, so before we go to questions, I want to kind of bring us back to the fact that we are at Women's Weekend. And welcome to the guys, though. And to say that in speaking of attributes, since I'm tasked with chairing this subcommittee on attributes for the board, I started thinking about attributes the way I look at them when I'm with people in a room and I observe how they're behaving and acting and speaking and listening and engaging. And I take mental notes. And there are people in this room, very much people right up here, people in various spaces that I travel in that I have learned from. They aren't always the people that you love or respect even sometimes, but you learn from their styles. This time, though, I'm doing a total cup half full. I asked the panelists, and I, with a little bit of apology, since I did want to give extra homework to our folks that stepped in, but I asked our original 5 panelists and myself really to do 2 words to describe each of the women who were going to be speaking. And I was the only one, in fairness, who saw this list because, make it confidential. But I wanted to hear what were the words in observing, because there's a power in that. I hope you would agree. And so what I thought was really cool was that the words that came up were things like powerful, thoughtful, nicely down to earth, gracefully forceful, polished, gently inquisitive, sincere, concerned, precise, humorous, welcoming, thorough, transformational, precocious, fearless, optimistic, wise, visionary, engaging, committed, purposeful, confident, dynamic, joyous, entrepreneurial, compassionate, honest, fresh thinker, astute, and open-minded. If we started our day if we started our day observing other people and actually telling them, coming from that previous group, a chance to tell people, in that meeting, you did X and X. That was so powerful for me. Or just file it for your own learning so that when you're in situations to bring that confidence back by virtue of how others are viewing you and pulling from what you have observed from others. I get the benefit of 14 other trustees, female trustees, to watch. Obviously, the men as well, absolutely outstanding. But for the purposes of this weekend, it is a learning opportunity for me to be able to hear, listen, and digest and work with such tremendous women. So I leave that with you as we segue to questions from the audience for our august panel.
Hello, my name is Nissa Karakis, Trinity 90. First of all, thanks to every one of you up in that stage for assuring everyone in the room that the management of our beloved university is in very good hands, so thank you. The best boards are the ones that are able to see around corners, anticipate challenges before they arrive. Katy, you mentioned some of these issues that you're concerned about. I'd be curious what each of you think are, we've talked about all the great things going in the way that Price's vision is leading us. What are we missing? Are there some big challenges that you hope the university will start tackling, that you've started tackling, that might impact its future direction or the lives of students?
I think the cost of attendance is something that all of us are very attuned to and concerned about. The cost of delivering the education and the income that comes in are not, they're not lining up right. And we have done a wonderful job as a university providing the full cost of financial aid to our students. In fact, Duke is ranked fairly high in covering the expenses of a student who comes here. We're also doing a lot more to reach into the high schools that we ignored for years, to identify and admit the capable low-income first-generation students that really were not able to come to Duke for so long, partly because the conversation wasn't happening. And I find that very exciting. It's, I think, up to 10% now. And but with that comes some challenges. You want to make sure every student who arrives at Duke has an equal opportunity to succeed. There are some programs that have been developed to make sure that that is the case with those students. We have a wonderful dean at Trinity who is, Valerie Ashby, is trying to make sure that all of the students on campus can take Econ 1 or Chemistry 1 and succeed. And some of that is a conversation with her faculty to say, okay, is this designed to introduce the students to the excitement of this subject matter? Is this how you would introduce them to it? Or are you just stuck in the past and you think that you should weed out the students who might not, in your mind, be capable of, the second year of chemistry or whatever? That's so exciting, but it costs money. And we, when you look, oh, how can Duke be raising tuition again? What is going on? Can't they fix that? We need to pay for the financial aid. We use revenue coming in the door to cover a lot of our financial aid. We do not have the endowment generated aid that many of the universities that we consider to be our peers, the Ivy Leagues, many others, Stanford. So we have to figure out how to right that ship. And we have a lot of really smart people working on it. But I think that's one of the biggest challenges. The Science and Technology Initiative is another. We need to do better there. Duke needs to come up. Again, it's an investment, but we have to be smart about how we invest. We can't do everything. And I think that's why Sally Kornbluth has been such a great leader in identifying the smart ways to elevate the science and the technology and working with her colleagues. Didn't mean to go on so long, but it's heartwarming that Duke has been able to do so much, and yet, we really have to figure out how to solve this.
And Katy, maybe back to the Alumni Network and the great work that came out. Dave Kennedy's with us, who co-chaired with Katy that committee. Sterling and I and Nicole Kempton and others were on it. Costs to do some of the work to engage our alumni around the world in a variety of ways. So maybe you want to just touch on that as its own challenge, but yet lever points that help make it work.
Yeah, I think so. So first of all, the mission is to create a community that's broader than just the students in the place, and at the nucleus of that community would be alumni, but the community wouldn't be just alumni; it's parents and friends and others. And so the idea is there's really sort of a symbiotic relationship between students on campus and students who have left campus and are now our alumni. And the proposition is our alumni in that broader community wants to engage in students, and students actually want to engage with alumni. So that's one way that it's sort of this symbiotic relationship. Second, alumni who leave here after 4 years or 6 years or 7 years or however many years that they spent here often need re-education at a later point in their life. I mean, the whole business model of learning for 4 years and then going to have a career for 40, that's weird. I mean, this just doesn't work anymore in today's environment. And so people have needs to come back and relearn. And so that's another sort of symbiotic relationship between the university and this broader community that's graduated. So the idea of activating the global network was that there's this network out there, and how is it that this place, Duke University, understands the needs and the talents and the passions of all the people who are in that network, and how does a university know that, understand it, tap into it in a way that really gets that symbiotic sort of ecosystem going between the people who are on this campus and the people who are no longer here. But that is a big, that would be a huge investment. I mean, just imagine how many alumni, Laura?
175,000.
175,000. So how is it that, I mean, we're not going to do that with human beings, right? And the cost of that labor to know every one of those 175,000 people. So there needs to be some, in my opinion, needs to be some technology platform that enables that. That's a big investment for any place, let alone a university, when we have needs like what Anne was talking about around scholarships, and needs for facilities, and needs for our campus in China, and
faculty,
and needs for commercializing research, and needs for, I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. So the balance of short-term needs and long-term ambition, I think, is something that we are constantly wrestling with on the board.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Ann Simpowski-Ward, and I have a question that you all are uniquely positioned to address. And that is, you are part of the Board of Trustees, but of course you're all women. Are there specific initiatives that the trustees are tackling that are related to women that either you are championing, supporting, and or most proud of? Because I assume there are allies that might have some initiatives specific to furthering women as it relates to Duke, and whether our voices can be better heard or we can participate or whatever it may be.
Well, the board itself, in this long tenure that I've had on the board, has changed. And there are far more women now, 14 or 15? 15.
15, but who's counting?
Okay, who's counting? But there were maybe 6 when I came on the board. So the initiative long started ago, but still going on, to add more women and more minorities and more individuals who show the breadth that is this university. In terms of, it's right here in this room, that is happening. But it's a process, because someone has to resign from the board or retire from the board for an opening to be created. So I think it's happening at the board level, and it's also happening at the school levels. So Fuqua, I know, but engineering, others. So everyone has that focus going on, certainly with respect to women. The leadership of this university, I think
8 of 10 deans.
8 of 10 deans are women.
Is that correct?
7 of
7.
10.
Oh, sorry.
All right.
And
Maybe.
many of us were on those search committees for those deans.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we have an influence there.
Okay. So the other thing I'd say as a non-Dookie is that I actually
You're a
see,
Dookie. You're not
well,
aware of that.
okay, so a deputy Dookie. Okay, Grant says that I am a Duke wannabe, but I got a good education at Wellesley College. I've just never taken him to Wellesley, so that's on my bucket list. But back to this, and this is a friend of Grant's that's talking. But, I see everybody, this group, but everyone on the board, but everyone at Duke, really striving for excellence at all times. I've served on the board at Wellesley. I've served on the board at the College of William and Mary in the state of Virginia, appointed by the governor. So I have seen other situations, is what I'm trying to say. And that pursuit of excellence truly differentiates this institution. Now, I don't want to be a propagandist here, but I would encourage anyone to consider going here who can get in. There are some of you who got in who might not be able to get in on today's standards, because let me say that it's pretty big. And I think that we have, 40,000 applicants for the same 1,600 slots that existed when you applied in 1990. So, but there weren't 40,000 applicants then. So this is a highly competitive environment. Am I right?
I don't know if I would get in now.
Oh, well, you'd get in.
You would definitely get in, Amy.
In other words, every year it's getting better. So it doesn't all happen at once, and I think we're saying that. It takes some time, and I say the administration has to weigh the things that I think that you have described best, because sometimes we have competing demands for what I'd call diminishing returns. Not returns, but resources.
Resources, yeah.
So that's a difficult situation.
We should talk about the win.
Go.
No.
No, go.
Okay, so another one to add to the list that Janet just mentioned about women. So I can't recall when this started, but it seems like maybe 6 years ago.
7, 8,
Somebody in the audience might know better than I. But there is, does anybody know about the Women's Impact Network here? Win? Raise your hand if you do.
Good.
Okay, that is fabulous. I wish that everybody in this room could wave their hand, and hopefully you check this out afterwards. So there was, I think this came out of a women's weekend maybe 6 years ago or so, and it was the proposition was, how is it that we rally the female component of our alumni base? So it was, in fact, a precursor to activating the global network, possibly. But anyway, really good job. So the idea was to create a network of women alumni who were super engaged and invested in the university from a time and a treasure standpoint. And it's sort of behind the Women's Weekend that's continued. It's very active in getting women on the various boards and engaged in the various volunteer and alumni things that you can do here.
Oh, and philanthropy.
And
I mean, I
philanthropy.
think that's
That's
key
why I said
cornerstone.
treasure. So it's been very active in getting people engaged, and I believe that, and there's a science behind this. When you are engaged, you give. You don't. Well, we don't. Women do not give to be able to engage. Men do that. What women do is they engage and then they give. And so the whole proposition was to engage women to get them not only volunteering here, but giving as an active alumni base within everybody's capacity.
I wanted to go back to the question briefly and another tack then, and that is the board is constantly learning and we're given opportunities to learn. And some of us are closer. I will say my role in the DAA makes me closer to what's happening in the student population or whatever, but we get regular presentations on different aspects of Duke life, and that can include assault. It can include challenges with social inequities. It can include the more dramatic isolated incidents, but an awareness of the totality of those and what's going on. The board, there is a deliberate effort to ensure that the board is aware of trends and what's going on. Mental health is another good example where we had a exposure to leadership on that front and what was happening. So the board is not the home for managing, directing, etc. But you heard of Mary Pat, for example, and you see the lens that she has and the kind of focus that she has around some of these really key issues. So we have the benefit of the learning from tremendous leadership at Duke and through students and then as parents or from other vantage points. But I didn't want to lose the fact that the board is definitely, quote, educated in a variety of ways.
There's a question over here.
Question?
There's one here.
Last one.
Oh, sorry, I was so good on time until this. Last one, yes, thank you.
There's one other person here.
Oh.
We should add two more.
Yes, we need to do
I know
two.
I think Laura's telling me to be quick.
Okay.
Well, thank you. And I think it says a lot about the dynamic of our board today, such that with the snow that came in, the ability that the board is so engaged, the women on the board are so engaged, that we had the ability to take other board members who were here and have them right on the stage as well. So I think that really does show a lot. We're fortunate to be in this room today, to hear you, to engage with you, to know more about you and the board. Does the board talk about, I don't want to say bringing the show on the road, but really bringing the message on the road, right?
That's an idea.
It's a fantastic way to really get the message out about our university. So how do we communicate to the broader people who can't be in this room, who didn't know about this room, or better yet, didn't think they should be in this room? Because it's a message that should be heard. So are you talking about that? And if so, how do you do it?
I'm
No,
just
and
going to
that's a
say,
great idea.
Danielle, thank you. We're going to file that idea. And we will absolutely consider that as a follow-up, given, the kind of road shows that take place periodically. This concept makes sense. Thank you. And there was one other, I just want to make sure, brief question here, and we'll be brief in our response.
I think there's also there are also other efforts to make the board more transparent.
Yes.
There's a conversation on campus a couple of weeks after each meeting that students are able to come to, or any other community members. I think it shouldn't be a mystery, and there are opportunities to make it even more transparent. Sorry, Terry.
I want to get back to the issue of governance. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg has famously been quoted as saying, when asked when will there be enough women on the Supreme Court, she said when there are 9, right? Because there were 9 men for many years, and nobody remarked on that. Okay, I don't know whether anyone else paid attention to this, but this year when I saw the announcement come out about the new trustees who were appointed, I was quite surprised to see that there wasn't a single woman. I don't see how we ever make up the disparity unless we are really conscious about doing it every year. So I'm, I'd be interested in any additional thoughts that you have about what we all can do as alumni to elevate women, deserving women whose voices should be on the Board of Trustees.
I think you suggest them. And I also think you have to remember that sometimes what shows up in one clump in a single year has been in the pipeline for 10. I mean, Bill Kalin, he was an amazing scientist and, won a Nobel Prize, but there weren't that many slots. It was a small little class. We have some big ones coming up, and I don't think you'll see all male situation again. But it's a good point.
Correct.
I mean, it's like,
Some years we have none, some years we have one, some years we have 6. So it's very uneven. In that
we need more diversity of all sorts. I mean, it's, and I think that being even more intentional about working on that pipeline and making sure that people are invited to come to the table at different places at Duke. And I would say any of you can help participate in that, because you heard the stories about how people got connected. Sometimes you start working in your regional alumni organization or the Women's Forum or whatever, and you just keep working on it and stay engaged. And I think if people who you identify as future leaders of Duke who don't fit the white male box and fill in some of the other ones, if they get encouraged by you, tapped on the shoulder and invited by you, that is a great thing to have happen.
I would also add one other thing. Speaking about men coming on the board, every man who comes on the board is highly vetted, and he has to buy into the collaborative operation that we have going on, which includes all of these women and others, or he probably isn't going to be invited to come on.
And just for the record, the Alumni Association, so our DAA board, through our nominating committee, there is the process may be a bigger word, but the ability for you to identify and bring names in through this channel. Again, looking at the bios and the backgrounds of the kind of people who are serving on the Board of Trustees, and much as you do, hopefully, in providing nominations to the Alumni Board or to other boards, professional boards at Duke. So do not lose that as an opportunity. We want you to help surface names that are going to be rising up throughout the boards of the university. This is not, it's not a detached process. It comes from people bringing names to the table. So with that, we have, that line of, we're the last thing between you and a cocktail. This is such an old story, but I can tell you're thirsty. And I want
And we are.
Yes, and we are too. It's been a long day for all of us. I'd like to do a quick thank you, please, to Jen Chambers, because Jen has been and obviously the team overall, but just what a pleasure it is to have every one of you in this room and being so active and engaged. And thank you to the panel.
Yes, thank you to the panel.
Okay.